Now, let's speak about COP28. Now, the annual summit, which we know was in Glasgow for COP26, we hosted it, would you believe will now have the biggest carbon footprint in the history of the annual climate summit because the UAE has invited record numbers of people. Experts have said at least 400,000 people are expected to travel to Dubai, that centre of climate conscience, for the 2-week event. Organisers have said the biggest attendance on record. I asked you earlier how many private jets it takes to send UK leaders out there. 3, it seems. We had David Cameron on one, apparently, Rishi Sunak on another, and the King on a third, which strikes me as being rather counterintuitive to the impetus behind this summit. Let's bring Rupert Read into the conversation. He's the co-director of the Climate Majority Project. Rupert, I presume you're not in favour of this summit because it's in oil-rich Dubai.
Yeah, it's a disaster all around, really, isn't it? And it's quite ridiculous, as you say, our so-called leaders taking these private jets out there separately. They could at least get in one together. Dubai is about the worst place in the world for having a COP meeting. It's very discredited because the boss of the whole COP and his company have basically been caught trying to make oil deals at the climate summit. It's a very bad look. And that's why, as you say, in the Climate Majority Project, we say this whole process is not what we need. What we actually need is for governments and localities and citizens to get down and dirty in the ground, in the dirt, growing food, guarding against flood risk, storing water, doing the kind of things that are necessary to protect us against the climate damage that we all know is here and the worst climate damage that is coming. You know, we've all experienced now things like floods, the extremes of temperatures last summer. It's time to actually get down and dirty, doing the work that needs to be done together to protect ourselves against this.
Okay. I mean, the Prime Minister has distanced himself from what he's described as ideological zealots. Obviously, we've seen a lot of activity from the likes of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, but actually that hasn't really advanced the cause at all, has it? Since Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion started stopping people from commuting to work and throwing orange powder about the place, the government's actually watered down its climate commitments. So this kind of climate activism, this extremism, is totally counterproductive, isn't it?
Well, I think you've got to make one or two distinctions. Extinction Rebellion in 2019 raised the issue and forced a national conversation, but that was 4 years ago. So I think the question you're asking is fair. Do we still need more and more radical climate activism now? What we say in the Climate Majority Project is anyone who thinks it's time for something other than that kind of activism, well, we're here for you. We're here for everybody who, as I was saying a minute ago, wants to take action in their local communities to make those communities more resilient. Or also action at work. That's what more and more people are doing, is looking to make their work, their businesses, their profession climate resilient and climate friendly. That's where the real action is now, in our view.
Well, you say action is in local communities, but aren't Brits doing enough in comparison to, say, countries like China and India? There's been a recent report out suggesting that there have been 5 million deaths as a result of air pollution. Most of them are occurring in China and India. So the UK is doing a great job. India and China need to do a lot more, don't they?
No, the way I'd put it is this. India and China need to do a lot more, but the UK is not doing a great job. The UK is doing a terrible job. Yeah, we don't have as many air pollution deaths as those countries. But our record
But we've reduced our carbon emissions substantially, havenent we?
We've reduced our climate emissions not as much as people think, because a lot of our climate emissions
since the 1960s.
A lot of our climate emissions we've just exported over that period to China and India. So we need to be reducing our emissions a lot more. But as I say, it's also about adaptation. It's about resilience building. And there again, the UK has got a really terrible record. It's been condemned by its own official committee on climate change.
Yeah, although you'd imagine that the average Brit is probably quite good at recycling compared to somebody living in China or India. We have to leave it there, Mr. Read. Thank you very, very much for your time this evening.
Yeah, it's not about recycling. It goes further
well,
than that.
I think recycling's part of it, isn't it? I mean, here we are doing our best, and yet at the same time, China are building yet more coal-fired power stations. And yet Extinction Rebellion think people who go to galleries are the problem, or indeed Wimbledon. Or maybe that was Just Stop Oil. They all meld into one, don't they?